Welcome back to Love and Lies TV. Today, I want to tell you a story that sounds familiar at first, but hides a crack you'd never notice. Unless you looked very, very closely, Jonathan and Amelia had been together for 16 years. You know the kind of marriage people look at and say, wow, that is the perfect modern American family. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, morning dog walkers, kids riding their bikes on spotless sidewalks. Jonathan was the definition of stability, successful, calm, predictable in the best way. Amelia was sharp, intelligent, a woman with her own career, always put together at every event they made money. They had a home. They had the life so many couples dream about. If you ran into them at a weekend gathering, you'd probably think, this is the couple that cracked the code to happiness. But you know, the scariest thing in a marriage isn't the yelling, it's the silence. The kind of silence that lasts long enough to cover tiny, delicate fractures. Fractures no one on the outside ever sees. And sometimes, not even the people living inside the marriage. Jonathan often told me he never believed his marriage was perfect. But he thought it was solid, safe, trustworthy. And Amelia, she always seemed fine, busy, energetic, in control. No one, not even Jonathan, saw a single sign of a storm coming. The couples who look the most okay are often the ones hiding the deepest secrets. And Amelia's secret is what changed Jonathan's entire life. That's where the story I'm about to tell you begins. The truth is, stability in a marriage can sometimes be like a fresh coat of paint covering walls that have already started to rot from the inside. Jonathan and Amelia were no exception. The more successful they became, the busier they got. The busier they got, the less they talked. Conversations that used to be full of laughter turned into quick exchanges like, I'm heading to work. I've got a meeting tonight. Are we free this weekend? But the weekend would pass anyway, each of them on their own schedule, in their own world, drifting apart in a silence neither of them dared to name. Jonathan told me he never thought that distance was dangerous. He believed, that's just how it is after many years of marriage. That silence is sometimes comfortable, that you don't need to sit down and share every little thing the way you did in the early days. And honestly, he thought Amelia understood that too. But Amelia saw that same silence as proof that their love was fading, that the care had thinned out, and she never said it out loud. In my work with couples, I see this all the time. One person thinks silence is peace. The other thinks silence is a slow goodbye. So there they were, living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, yet holding two completely opposite interpretations of the same silence. And you know what the real danger is? When both people start filling in the blanks on their own. Jonathan filled in the blanks with the belief that everything was fine. Amelia filled them with loneliness. There were nights when Jonathan came home late from work and found the living room lights still on. Amelia focused on her laptop. He'd walk over, rest a hand on her shoulder, and ask a simple, everyday question. Was today okay? Amelia would smile. It was fine. But inside she was thinking, are you asking because you care, or because it's just something a husband is supposed to say? Questions like that, left unspoken, start settling into layers of emotional sediment. Small, almost invisible, but left there long enough, they become a crack that only needs one tiny spark to turn into a collapse. And all those unspoken things are what eventually led Jonathan to a discovery that shattered his entire life. Something he himself could never have imagined. The secret hidden beneath the silence of the woman he trusted most, Jonathan told me. That day began like any other. No gut feeling, no signs, no cosmic warning. Just an ordinary afternoon when he decided to clean out Amelia's car, something he did every few months, a small gesture of care. He opened the door, slid the seat back, picked up stray paper cups that still smelled faintly of coffee, gathered a few crumpled receipts from the console, and then, tucked beneath the passenger seat, where the light didn't reach, he saw it. A leather-bound notebook. Thick, elegant, carefully wrapped. At first he thought it was Amelia's work planner. For someone in event management, carrying a fancy notebook wasn't surprising. But when he opened it, Everything started slipping off its axis. Jonathan told me he didn't read it out of curiosity, but out of a deeper, instinctive feeling. Something is wrong. The first page made his heart skip. The second page made his whole body go cold. And by the fifth page, he realized his marriage had ended long ago. He was simply the last one to know inside. Amelia had written detailed accounts of a 2-year relationship with a man named Brandon. Not vague diary entries, but full descriptions, dates, places, feelings, even the reasons she chose him. Jonathan said he could have survived the idea of an affair. It would hurt, of course, but it wouldn't be the worst pain he'd ever known. But what truly broke him was in the pages that came next. These weren't diary entries anymore. They were plans. A plan written with a level of cold clarity that made his skin crawl. When to file for divorce to maximize advantage. How to craft the narrative that Jonathan was neglectful and emotionally absent. Financial calculations, percentages of assets, notes on which accounts she could slowly siphon money from so he wouldn't notice. And a chilling line about Brandon. He's not the future. He's just leverage. Jonathan told me he sat inside that car for almost an hour, not crying, not angry, just numb. He said it felt like discovering that the person he'd been sleeping next to every night wasn't the woman he loved, but some other version of her. Distant, sharp, calculated. A stranger wearing the face he trusted. That little leather notebook, hidden under a car seat, overturned everything Jonathan had believed for 16 years. And it also opened a new chapter. One where he had to become someone he never imagined he'd need to be. Jonathan told me that if the notebook had only revealed an affair, he could have survived it. It would hurt, yes, deeply. But at least infidelity has an emotional logic to it. It can be explained, processed, even forgiven by some. But the pages after that were no longer about the heart. They were about strategy. And when betrayal takes the shape of strategy, it becomes the coldest thing a spouse can ever inflict on you. In those neatly written, perfectly spaced pages, Amelia had drawn out an entire timeline. Not a timeline of love, but a timeline of escape. She even wrote, "The best time to file for divorce is when Jonathan is at his busiest, reduces his ability to push back." Just one sentence. But it carried so much weight that Jonathan said he had to close his eyes for a moment because the pain was physically overwhelming. There were sections where Amelia listed out methods to portray Jonathan as a husband who neglects his wife. Not because he actually was, but because she needed him to be, in the story she planned to bring into the courtroom. And then there was the money, $47,000, moved in small, careful increments, so discreet that without the notebook pointing it out, Jonathan might never have noticed. She called it her safety fund. A harmless phrase on the surface. But to Jonathan, it felt like a knife twisting in the very place he trusted the most. And maybe the strangest kind of pain for him came from the way Amelia wrote about Brandon. Not like a forbidden love, not like an emotional connection, but like a tool. She wrote, "Brandon isn't the future. He's temporary. He just helps me feel alive until everything is finalized." See that? This wasn't betrayal of the heart, the kind people fall into when they're weak or lost. This was structured betrayal, a betrayal written out, calculated, measured, and arranged step by step. And when betrayal comes with strategy, it becomes a wound that doesn't just break someone's heart, it makes them lose faith in their own memories. Jonathan once thought he understood his wife. But those pages told him that maybe the woman he loved for 16 years never truly existed. Jonathan told me that after finishing the notebook, he no longer felt angry. The initial wave of rage evaporated quickly, replaced by something else, a chilling clarity. He realized that if Amelia had spent 2 years preparing the perfect chessboard, then yelling, confronting her, or breaking down would only put him exactly where she expected him to be. "She planned for all of that," Jonathan said. "She predicted my reactions, but she didn't predict my silence." So instead of screaming, "Why?" Jonathan closed the notebook, slid it back under the passenger seat, exactly where he found it, and began a different kind of war. No noise, no drama, no confrontation, only action. That night, in his home office, Jonathan photographed every page of that notebook with hands that still trembled. He saved them onto a separate hard drive, then backed them up again on an encrypted computer. The very next morning, he went to see a lawyer, someone his friends had described with just 2 words: absolutely ruthless. The lawyer read a few pages and looked up. "Jonathan, this is a bomb, but you need to stay calm. If you strike at the wrong moment, you lose." And Jonathan really was calm. The lawyer advised him to hire a private investigator, not to catch Amelia cheating, the evidence was already overwhelming, but to build a complete timeline: dates, locations, patterns, everything matching the notes in her journal. He also hired a forensic accountant to review their joint accounts. And just as the journal described, money had been siphoned off in small, careful amounts. Not a lot each time, but enough to reveal intent. At the same time, Jonathan quietly locked down the most critical parts of his business assets, all legal, all within his rights, all silent. And during those 5 weeks, Jonathan continued living with Amelia as if nothing had changed. They still had dinner together. He still asked her the same familiar question: "How was your day?" He still smiled like he knew nothing. And Amelia, exactly as her notebook stated, believed Jonathan suspects nothing. He let her believe that he let her think her plan was unfolding perfectly. But in reality, during those 5 silent weeks, Jonathan built the strongest wall he had ever placed between himself and the woman he once trusted the most. And that wall was strong enough to collapse the entire plan Amelia had spent 2 years constructing. Jonathan told me that during those 5 weeks, one night, he sat in his car a long time, holding his phone, staring at a name he never imagined he'd have to call: Sophia Keller, Brandon's wife. He hesitated, not because he wanted to protect Brandon, but because he understood that one phone call would destroy another woman's entire world. A woman who also had no idea she was living inside a lie. But then Jonathan thought, if I know the truth, she deserves to know too. So he made the call. Sophia answered with a polite, surprised tone. Unaware of the storm that was about to hit her life, Jonathan spoke slowly, carefully, like someone carrying a truth too heavy to place in another person's hands. He asked if she could meet him, discreetly, urgently, and very seriously. The next day, Jonathan handed Sophia the notebook, the scanned copy, along with the investigator's reports. Sophia didn't cry at first. She just sat still, eyes wide, as if trying to understand exactly where her world had cracked. But when Sophia reached the part where Amelia called Brandon temporary, her tears finally fell, like she no longer had the strength to hold them back. As someone who worked in HR, Sophia knew exactly what she had to do. Everything Jonathan handed her, the timeline, the evidence, the journal, was more than enough to trigger a major internal investigation at the company. Just a few days later, Sophia filed a formal complaint with senior HR. No screaming, no bitterness, just a woman choosing the truth. The investigation moved faster than even Jonathan expected. A week later, Amelia and Brandon were suspended, and not long after that, both were terminated. When Jonathan reached this part of the story, he spoke softly. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt lighter, because the truth finally ended up exactly where it needed to be. Jonathan told me this: some truths don't need to be shouted in a crowd. Whisper them in the right place, at the right time, and an entire world can shift. He didn't post online. He didn't create drama. He didn't turn the story into some public revenge campaign. The way many people do when they're angry, Jonathan understood Amelia's industry: events, communications, PR. A world where reputation isn't just an asset, it's oxygen. And oxygen can drain fast with even the smallest puncture. So Jonathan chose 3 people. 3 names he knew well. People who simply cannot keep a secret, no matter how hard they try. The kind of natural information spreaders who walk into any networking event already knowing half the industry's gossip, Jonathan told them the truth. No exaggerations, no embellishments, no hatred. Just a few pages of the journal, enough to make the truth undeniable. Then he stepped back. He simply let the first domino fall. 3 days later, the first piece of news reached him. A conference where Amelia was scheduled as a keynote speaker had suddenly changed its program. A week later, 2 more events removed her from their lineups without explanation. Then one quiet afternoon, Jonathan received a message from someone in the industry. "Have you heard? People are saying Amelia violated professional ethics. It's serious." From there, everything unfolded exactly the way he knew it would. Amelia's reputation, something she had built for over a decade, didn't collapse in a single explosion. It crumbled in a series of tiny, subtle drops. A whisper in a hallway, a murmur during a meeting, an email declining a partnership. And when your entire career runs on trust, losing trust means losing everything. Jonathan said he didn't feel happy. He didn't feel triumphant. He just felt something strange, a kind of quiet clarity, like justice had found its way on its own, without him needing to bang a drum for attention. And in that moment, he realized, sometimes you don't need to destroy someone. You just need to open the door and let the truth walk in. When the court date finally arrived, Jonathan no longer felt anger. It all felt like a play he had to finish performing, all the way to the final act. He sat there, looking at the woman who had been his wife for 16 years. Yet she felt like a stranger, someone he had tried so hard to understand, but ultimately never truly knew. Amelia walked into the courtroom with the same confidence she carried in her work. But Jonathan said he could see something different in her eyes, confusion, maybe even fear, tucked neatly beneath her flawless makeup. Jonathan's attorney presented every piece of evidence, every withdrawn amount, every journal note, every timestamp that matched the investigator's findings. All the puzzle pieces Amelia thought she had hidden so cleverly were now laid out neatly before the court. Amelia tried to fight back. She said the journal was misunderstood. She said Jonathan was twisting her emotions. She said the money transfers were simply planning for the future. But when asked why she wrote the line, "Brandon isn't the future, he's just temporary," she went silent. And sometimes, a moment of silence in a courtroom weighs more than every accusation put together. The judge issued the final ruling quickly, so quickly that Jonathan felt almost dizzy. Amelia received only about 15% of the total assets. There was no 50-50 split like most divorces. She was ordered to return all the money she had secretly withdrawn. She lost any claim to Jonathan's business assets. He kept the house, most of the investments, and full control of his finances. Jonathan told me that when he heard the ruling, he didn't feel happy. Not at all. He just felt tired, like he had run a marathon, finally reached the finish line, but his legs were still trembling from everything they had carried. And Amelia, she stood there silently. No tears, no screaming, no blaming anyone, just staring down at her own hands, the same hands that had written the plan she thought would lead her into a brand new life. But instead of the bright future she imagined, that divorce became the door that slammed shut on everything she once had. Brandon, meanwhile, the man who once thought he was living an exciting secret life, now stood in court looking like someone washed ashore by a wave too strong to fight. He lost his job first. Then he lost his wife. But the deepest cut was losing most of his custody rights. Jonathan said he didn't cry because he lost Amelia. He cried because he lost his kids. And that, even though Jonathan never said it out loud, brought him a quiet, human sadness. Sophia, Brandon's wife, endured a shock no less heavy than Jonathan's. But unlike Amelia, Sophia didn't argue, didn't blame, didn't spin a story. She stood tall, entering the courtroom with the calm of a woman who had already heard enough and now had only one mission left: protect her children. When the judge reviewed everything, Brandon's affair, his unstable finances, his termination, and even Amelia's journal calling him temporary, The legal scales tipped entirely toward Sophia. She was granted primary custody. Brandon received visitation, but limited, and that was what broke him in the courtroom. Not Sophia walking away, but the reality that his children were now something he could only see on a schedule. Meanwhile, Sophia, she walked out of her marriage with an entirely different posture. Not as someone abandoned, not as a pitiful victim, but as a woman who chose the truth and had that strength recognized by the court, the company she worked for. The same company where Brandon and Amelia once worked, learned everything. They witnessed her transparency and professionalism throughout the internal investigation. And then something happened that Sophia never expected. She got promoted, not out of pity, but because they saw clearly that she was someone who handled crisis with logic, ethics, and a steadiness most people simply don't have. Jonathan paused for a moment before saying, "Out of the three of us, Sophia is the one who stood back up the most beautifully." And sometimes, in the most painful collapses, there is still someone who walks out with a stronger, more intact heart than before. Jonathan never imagined he would become a main character on social media. He's the type who lives quietly, no oversharing, no drama, no chasing attention. But the internet is a strange place. It can drag you into the spotlight even when you're trying to stay in the shadows. The story began to spread when someone, Jonathan still doesn't know who, posted anonymously on a large form no real names, no addresses, but detailed enough for anyone who knew them to figure it out. That afternoon, Jonathan picked up his phone and saw hundreds of messages. Half were supportive. "You did the right thing. She deserved the consequences. Men like you are rare." But the other half were knives, cruel, heartless. "Did you really have to destroy her like that?" Someone even wrote, "You're the kind of cowardly man who punishes women just to feel powerful." Jonathan said, "I had no idea who these people were, but they talked like they lived inside my house." And soon after, things spun completely out of control. He started getting doxxed, people posting his home address, his workplace, even his phone number. Threatening and hateful messages flooded in. Someone wrote, "I know where you live." Others told him he should be ashamed for life. Jonathan said, eyes heavy, "I didn't realize how vicious the internet could be until people thought they understood my story." The worst part wasn't the insults. It was the feeling of being split in half. Half the world calling him a hero, the other half calling him a monster. And when you're cast as both at the same time, you start asking yourself, who am I really in this story? Jonathan described those days as standing between two tornadoes. On one side, the hatred of strangers. On the other, the support he wasn't even sure he deserved. And in the middle of that chaos, Jonathan realized something. Even if you never wanted to be a controversial figure, life can still shove you right into that role, because the truth never pleases everyone. Jonathan told me their final meeting wasn't a conversation. It felt like two people standing on opposite ends of a burned bridge. No way to cross back, nothing left to salvage. Amelia was the one who reached out first. Her message was short, cold. "We need to talk." Jonathan didn't want to, but he also didn't want the story to die in silence. So they met at Jonathan's brother's house, a neutral place where no one could claim threats or manipulation. Amelia walked in with red eyes, not from crying, but from anger. Angry that Jonathan had destroyed her plan. Angry that he didn't react the way she expected. Angry that he had outmaneuvered her. "You ruined my life," Amelia said, her voice tight. "You destroyed my career, my reputation, everything I built." Jonathan said he didn't respond. For the first time in months, he felt no anger, just a quiet exhaustion, like the layer of ash left after a fire has burned itself out. He took out his phone, opened the photo of the journal page he'd saved all this time, and placed it in front of Amelia. One sentence. One more year. Jay still suspects nothing. I'll be free and fully secured. Amelia stared at her own handwriting. She didn't speak. She just inhaled deeply, as if trying to swallow a truth she never wanted to face. Jonathan told me it was the only moment in their entire meeting where she was truly silent. No excuses, no explanations, no deflection. He then spoke slowly, every word deliberate. "You spent 2 years planning to destroy me. I spent 5 weeks destroying your plan. The only difference is, you started first." Amelia broke down crying. Not the cry of regret, but the cry of someone watching their perfect blueprint collapse, with nothing left to cling to. Jonathan stood up. No hug, no comforting, no looking back. He told me, "I didn't walk away because I hated her. I walked away because it was time for us to stop." At the exact point where the truth finally showed itself. From the perspective of a marriage and family specialist, Jonathan and Amelia's story isn't actually a story about infidelity. Infidelity was just the surface, the tip of the iceberg. What destroyed this marriage was the nature of the betrayal. In many couples, cheating comes from emotion, a moment of weakness, loneliness, or disconnection. Still wrong, but it's the kind of wrong born from the heart's chaos. But Amelia didn't betray out of emotion. She planned it. She calculated. She evaluated timing, strategy, cost, and benefit. She viewed her marriage not as a relationship, but as a financial contract waiting to be closed. In marriage psychology, we call this structural betrayal. It's completely different from emotional cheating. It's colder, sharper, deeper, because the person isn't swept away by feelings. They're fully conscious, logical, and intentional in their betrayal. Jonathan's deepest pain wasn't that Amelia chose another man. His deepest pain was that she chose benefit over him. That for 2 full years she wasn't lost. She was running a project. And when someone turns their spouse into a project, marriage stops being marriage. It becomes a negotiation, one that only one side knows they're part of. Many people asked why Jonathan reacted so harshly, why he didn't choose forgiveness, why he didn't just walk away quietly. But anyone who has ever experienced systematic betrayal understands this. Silence is also a form of dying. In psychology, Jonathan's reaction is called a survival response. When someone realizes they weren't deceived once, not in a single moment of weakness, but through a multi-year plan carried out in silence, they no longer feel like they're fighting heartbreak. They feel like they're fighting an attack. Jonathan didn't seek revenge. He defended himself, in the only way he knew how, to protect his life, his career, and his dignity. And sometimes, in battles you never asked to fight, self-defense becomes the instinct that keeps you standing, while everything someone hid from you tries to pull you under. When we step back and look at this entire story, remember this. This isn't simply a story about infidelity. It's a story about calculation, power, and survival inside a marriage. A place where people sometimes choose to break the very person whose hand they once held for years. And when someone is pushed to their absolute limit, they can become a version of themselves they never thought possible. If today's story made you think, let me know in the comments. If you want more people to understand the real hidden complexities inside relationships, hit like and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe to Love and Lies TV, so you never miss a story we uncover together.